the Silver Age and the rise of the Blue Bloods. The legacy of the Saturn death cult and its effect on mankind really begins with the priesthoods of the Silver Age and the rise of the nobility, the Blue Bloods. Central to the existence of the new Silver Age priesthoods was the belief that what had destroyed the Golden Age could happen again. Utilizing the new technology of writing, they set about recording the cataclysmic events as the Word to serve as a memory and a warning to future generations. These warnings formed the basis of secret societies within these priesthoods. Preparations were made to ensure survival should doomsday return. The advent of writing gave the priesthoods of the Silver Age the technology to keep alive the memories of the cataclysmic end to the Golden Age. As people began to forget how Saturn once ruled the heavens, the increasingly misunderstood records of the priesthoods would become the basis for the beliefs of mystery schools and secret societies down through the ages. The Second Age of Discovery. A second great age of voyage and discovery ensued, in which the refugees of the destroyed Golden Age civilizations determined to make a survey of their transformed world and cosmos and establish through their priesthoods the righteous and justice they perceived to be the legacy of that former age. Weights and measures and calendars were established and enshrined by law in a growing network of interlinked temples and monuments that span the globe. The Masonic mystery schools of the great civilization builders had arrived. Was Egypt's ancient civilization a legacy of refugees that had survived the great cataclysm and had brought the Golden Age to an end? Some esoteric traditions trace Egypt's past to Atlantis. Earth captures the moon. In keeping with the arrival of the Silver Age and its new sun, a new silvery marvel could now be seen in the heavens, Earth's moon. Captured by Earth and the distinctive chaos that was the Saturnian system's demise, was this white globe exhibited crescent-like phases under the sun's light that harkened back to the glory days of the Golden Age, when Saturn's rings would be illuminated as crescents surrounding the former deity. It's a matter of conjecture of when Earth captured the moon. Contrary to popular belief, the moon's heavenly cratered surface is actually proof of extreme electrical strike activity due to the crater's almost uniformly perfect circular shapes. Meteorites and asteroids create angular impact craters and rarely hit celestial bodies at perfect 90-degree angles. Electrical experiments do, however, show electrical lightning produced the same kind of cratering as seen on the moon. The moon's craters can therefore not be used to date the age of the moon based on meteorite impacts, a rare event in any case throughout human history. The new moon proved an excellent keeper of time, yet its arrival would only serve to diminish the memory of the original crescents of Saturn and confuse the knowledge. Preserved in the masses of crescent-like symbols established by the priesthoods, moon cults began to distort the original intent of these symbols. Reminded of that castle, the coral castle over there at Leedscallons. He's got crescents and Saturn in his little abode there. I'm wondering if that's what he's referring to with some of his hints. And old knowledge gradually gave way under the weight of the new and more confused fertility rituals. Ominously, the seeds for the more sinister sex and blood rituals that would begin to spread their influences in the ages to come can be traced to the foundation of these early moon cults. The moon's almost uniformly circular craters could not have been created by multiple meteorite impacts, which would have created a majority of angular impact craters. Electrical strikes are a better explanation. Temples, priest kings, and the rise of international commerce. With the establishment of weights and measures, an excitingly new yet dangerously insidious concept began to take hold within the temples of priesthoods: the advent of the universal language of international commerce. The driving factor in the increase of trade in the Silver Age was the newly derived notion of money. At this time, money was issued in the form of clay tablet receipts, against the production of goods by any given society or people. This clay tablet money was measured by and limited to the amount of goods that could be produced and stored in people's warehouse. The money was only as valuable as the amount of goods that were actually stored. This had been a central feature of the laws established by the priesthoods in ensuring equal weights and measures. However, discoveries in the mining of gold and silver quickly established a link between these metals and the idea of money. Due to the difficulty in counterfeiting these metals, it was realized that gold and silver could act as an alternative to clay tablets being used as money. This was especially useful when it came to trade between geographically separated peoples who could not verify other people's storehouses, but who would know that gold as an accepted store of value could not be faked. Unfortunately, this international element to trading quickly turned the new gold and silver money into commodities in their own right, as each society refused to accept the clay tablet receipts of other societies. Trade boomed, but at the cost of losing control over regulating the value of the fruits of your labor. That was now in the hands of the gold and silver producers. The laws established by the priesthoods as a way of ensuring just and equal weights and measures were thus cleverly subverted by the introduction of gold-backed money, which was now entirely in the hands of the gold and silver producers. As noted, under this system, the people who actually produced useful items like food and clothing lost any control they had over setting the value of their products. All they could do was price them in gold or silver, the mercantiles. Corrupt elements in the temples quickly saw the advantage in controlling gold and silver as a way of dictating the value for the fruits of everyday people's hard labor. With it came the transfer of immense power to highly positioned individuals within the increasingly corrupt priesthoods. As the Silver Age approached its zenith, certain priesthoods quickly consolidated their power via this new money system, until all wealth found itself being concentrated in the hands of a shrinking minority. The temple became this system's center of operations, its central bank, and thus ultimately heralded the emergence of that most insidiously influential of historical characters, the priest kings. These priest kings were the original blue bloods. In reality, they were nothing more than mere merchant bankers with a monopoly over the arguably useless production of gold and silver. With the emergence of these temple-based banking parasites, the peoples of Earth began to experience a new and most sinister force, debt-based slavery. It was at about this time that some mothers started to notice that some of their children were going missing. Origins of the Tower of Babel. The new temple-inspired commerce system proved a pervasive influence from the far eastern realms of the ancient Middle Kingdom and the former heights of Pan and on through the rich lands of Vendaya. Newly established priest kings steadily accumulated wealth and power. In particular, certain elements of the Li clan of ancient China were to grasp this new concept of trade financing and expand upon it to establish unimaginable influence over the hemisphere. Egypt and Samaria and the surrounding nations particularly came under the sway of this global trade system. With it, the slave trade flourished due to the need to mine more and more of the yellow metal, particularly in the mines of ancient Egypt's fishery region. Soon, gold gained idol-like attributes, and its ability to sway the thoughts of men and the love of money steadily supplanted the Golden Age notion of living a just and righteous life. Unfortunately, not with all of us, though. The tragedy was that all the careful work by the early priesthoods in preserving the memory of a righteous and just Golden Age through a system of laws and accurate weights and measures was now being usurped by this new and easily manipulated system of commerce based on gold-backed money. The new system of commerce was the merchant banker's way of trying to build a man-made replacement for the lost heavenly ladder of the Axis Mundi that had served as the original symbol for the ascent to heavenly authority. Under this new system, merchant bankers hiding behind the authority of the temple would be elevated to a position of heavenly-like authority over all commercial activity. The old established concept of authority as being founded on righteousness and justice was now replaced with the merchant banker's debt-based slavery system. No other place exemplified this more than a place called Babel on the ancient plains of Shinar, a future location of the city of Babylon. There, the central banking temple and its merchant bankers saw their financial authority grow to towering proportions, giving rise to the legend of the Tower of Babel. Gustav Dor's Tower of Babel is the popular conception of the Babel legend. This portrays the story as a building project that was halted when the builders' languages were scrambled. Instead, the city of Babel was like the financial center known today as the City of London, and its tower was equivalent to the Bank of England. The scrambling of the languages finds its echo in today's financial collapse, with its myriad of incomprehensible and infraudulent financial products. Your clay tablets are no good here. By the order of High Temple of Babylon, idiot. One day at the gates of Babel. Poor guy. So-called Tower of Babel referred to the high authority of Central Temple which governed the financial system of the city of Babel. If you look closely at the biblical account of the Babel story, you will see that it was primarily a city that was being built on which was abandoned. Reference to a city in the Bible generally means a system or a way of doing things. Compare Jerusalem with New Jerusalem, and Babylon with Mystery Babylon. Man-made economic catastrophe replaces memory. Man-made economic catastrophe replaces memories of planetary upheavals. Of course, as the ensuing ages would show over and over again, a debt-based monetary system eventually implodes under its own debt-laden weight. And the higher you build its edifice, the mightier the crash. In an age fresh from multiple cosmic upheavals, the peoples of the earth found themselves experiencing something unique, a man-made global catastrophe in the form of systemic economic meltdown. In this way did the so-called Tower of Babel collapse, and the global economic chaos that followed forced whole nations and peoples to go back to their old diverse languages of commerce and trade. A confusion of different weights and measures now reigned, unsupported by any universal and unifying financial system. The priest kings were overthrown, and in their place stepped up the men of great renown, the most famous being Nimrod, the mighty hunter. As is always the case, in the wake of an economic collapse, a time of tyrants follows. Nimrod, pictured left, the original tyrant. Note the Venus starburst he's wearing, like a modern wristwatch, except in this case, he knew Venus as Ishtar. Compare Ishtar symbol at right. Both images, Purple Dawn, from the Purple Dawn. However, deep within the ruins of the now discredited temples of the priest kings, dark secret societies sought to preserve the concept of debt-based slavery as part of their mystery teachings. These illuminated ones struck a bargain with the Blue Bloods, the deposed priest kings, and embarked on the centuries of secret ritual refinement of the old alchemical creed of universal dominance through the power of creating wealth out of nothing, the power to issue debt-based money. As the age of silver drew to a close, more children were noticed to be going missing. On the horizon hovered a menacing figure, a celestial red-painted warrior Mars, and with him came the age of heroes and further upheavals. With him came war and the Bronze Age of men. The Bronze Age. Man as God. With the passing of the Silver Age, a search began for the perfect alloy of God and man. What was once the domain of mighty planets would now be the mythic and heroic exploits of the Bronze Age of man. It would be a time when conflict and war would become man's highest expression. A now comparatively calm cosmos presided over the dawn of the Bronze Age man. For the first time, mankind could look up into the heavens and see a sky not unlike what we see today. Complacency regarding the movements of the planets started setting in, and man began to look within himself as a means of defining both the past and the future. The fear of doomsday shifted radically away from meticulous observation of the planets to a fear of bringing doomsday onto oneself via one's own actions. In this way did the world see the rise of demigods, powerful mythical men and women whose destinies were considered independent of the will of whatever gods had gone before. A golden age meant little in an age where men came to believe they could be a king by their own hand. The warrior king now ruled and assumed the mantle of the Blue Bloods, whose power had been declining after the events at Babel. The age of war was the highest expression of man, now held ascendancy with art and literature, embracing the theme of the individual's will to power as the essence of a new heroic age. However, Mars and Venus were going to have at least one last word on who really did determine the rise and fall of kings and kingdoms. Rivers would run red, locust storms would strip the land, frogs would breed like rabbits, the firstborn children would suffer statistically improbable rates of death. Worst of all, slaves would feel free to throw off their master's yoke, and an old idea of what constituted righteousness and justice would reemerge. Though a promising beginning for this new breed of blue bloods, the Bronze Age of man was not going to be a total picnic. Those warrior kings who would be their own and everybody else's masters. Mars and Venus continue to threaten the Earth. The first clue as to what awaited the inhabitants of the Bronze Epoch could have been deduced from the fate of a little-known city-state that enjoyed a certain specialized agricultural monopoly, courtesy of the rise of agriculture near the end of the preceding age of silver. Some plants had been found to exhibit desirable properties other than nourishment, though this would have been known at a local level for millennia. It wasn't until the advent of concentrated farming that the commercial potential of these certain plants could be realized. Chief amongst these was the now infamous poppy plant, a flower capable of transporting those who indulged in its juices into blissful, myopic trances, free of all lingering doomsday anxieties. In the city-state that enjoyed a monopoly in the cultivation and distribution of this highly addictive drug, Sodom and Gomorrah. Sodom and Gomorrah was, in its day, the Afghan opium fields, the Golden Triangle, and the British East India Company rolled into one. Its product was known as the grapes of Gomorrah, to others as wormwood, and a certain Jesus Christ would himself one day be offered its numbing comfort as he hung dying in agony on a Roman cross. Forget the stories of its sexual depravities and deviant proclivities. This town was an efficient drug-dealing operation, second only to the CIA, which was around back then. No, it wasn't. I'm assuming he means today. Why, whatever do you mean? And its market at the beginning of an increasingly immoral age of bronze was only getting bigger. I mean, even back then they were doing it. The more things change, the more they stay the same. Quite naturally, Sodom and Gomorrah's opium trade had proved remarkably recession-proof in the aftermath of the Tower of Babel economic debacle. People always got to get high. Under such circumstances, people just want to forget, kick back, and get out of it. Opium has an excellent capacity to help you do just that, and its addictive properties ensured a ready supply of willing debitors to the temple-based merchant bankers who had survived the fallout from Babel. Due to its burgeoning wealth and influence as a result of the trade of opium, Sodom and Gomorrah proved a robust economic model, perfectly capable of stepping into Babel's shoes. It quickly became a magnet for drug traffickers and moneylenders all over. One such trader and his friend, however, would soon find themselves unwilling witnesses to a new onslaught of interplanetary skirmishes, with dire consequences for the now flourishing Sodom and Gomorrah economy, and what would be the beginnings of a series of terrifying reminders of what still was the most potent force in determining the future of mankind. Sodom and Gomorrah suddenly ceased to exist. In one night, the drug-dealing capital of the Old Testament world was completely obliterated. In a way that would haunt kings and paupers alike, and scar forevermore the psyches of those who would do naughty things in public toilets. What? The trader and his friend mooching about their business in and around Sodom and Gomorrah were a certain Lot and Abram. Lot got out just in time thanks to a warning from Abram, who seemed to have had prior knowledge of what was coming down on the city. On the way out, Lot's wife unwisely took a look back at the rain of carnage annihilating the city, and reportedly, as the expression goes, froze into a pillar of salt in sheer terror of the sight. A massive interplanetary arching bolt of plasma, vaporizing the Earth at its white-hot point of contact, will do that to you. A John Martin painting captures the carnage inflicted on Sodom and Gomorrah. That really happened? I always thought that was just a story. Or maybe it was the spectacle of an out-of-control Mars or Venus unexpectedly looming large in the night sky, while indiscriminately pouring giant electrical flames onto the Earth that did it. In any case, Earth had just been given another reminder that Venus or Mars, I'm not sure which one, for this particular event, still had the capacity to turn up at inconvenient times. The upshot was that Sodom and Gomorrah was gone, and warrior kings the world over now had a whole new set of problems to deal with, least of which was the various people under their control were demanding that they do something about it. But what to do? Enter our friends, the Priest Kings, the original Blue Bloods. They had an interesting solution for these warrior king upstarts, a set of sexy rituals designed to placate the angry gods that would consolidate power over the people, except that they weren't sexy at all, because since the end of the Silver Age, these rituals had degenerated into truly frightening ceremonial gang rapes, complete with the sexual debauching of children and babies, followed by their actual agonizing murder. Oh God, that's terrible. It's just wicked and horrible. The Saturn death cult begins. They called it kind of a sex magic within the hidden secret societies and mystery schools from previous age. The mythologies and legends recorded the actual planetary events of the Golden Age had been distorted into literal humanistic dramas. These dramas were then to be physically reenacted out as ritual by those aspiring to own the legacy of Saturn's power and authority as creator. Under this scenario, you could pick out any number of warped sexual patterns within mythology and turn it into perverted sexual satisfaction masked as ceremony. Old man Saturn takes young Venus as a bride in the myths. So on Earth, the king takes a child, priestess of Aphrodite, and has sex with her. Is the warrior god born of Venus, who rebels against Saturn and ultimately ascends to heaven to have sex with his mother. Ugh. So warrior kings
Been getting any?
Only your sister.
Well, better my sister than my mom, though my mom's not bad.
The warrior kings find themselves doing the same thing in defiance of their fathers. Check out King David's son, Absalom, in the Bible. That's just disgusting. Saturn, under his Greek identity as the god Kronos, devours his own children. So human kings have reportedly done the same with human children. Possibly even their own, as the occasion demands. See the suspected antics of one Caligula. That's so disgusting. It's hard to read, really. Jupiter Zeus determines to take Saturn Kronos' crown by gutting him to release his previously devoured sisters and brothers from Saturn's bowels. Zeus then promptly marries his sister Hera. Naturally, earthly kings follow suit and end up marrying and having sex with their sisters. Moronic inbreed errors ensue, and today we can see the legacy of this policy within our various political elites. Well, I don't know about it. Maybe calling them elite, maybe sick and demented, because it's more like it. Rubens' depiction of Saturn devouring his own children. Some human kings have been accused of trying to emulate this act, though no real public evidence of this exists. Man, I don't know how that ever got started. And so on. Ritual sex act after ritual sex act. Blood sacrifice after blood sacrifice. Ritualistic act of cannibalism after ritualistic act of cannibalism. The Silver Age's need to record actual cosmic events as mythic records to ensure doomsday lessons would not be forgotten, was eroded into what became a sex ritual control mechanism. This mechanism could be seen as the first applications of shadow government-sponsored mind control programs. They were designed to reduce once proud warrior kings to the role of sex puppets in an insane attempt to imbue a supposed elite class of people with the authority of Saturn as cosmic lord and creator. Power politics on Earth had taken a nasty turn, even as the planets Mars and Venus continued to menace the population's existence. Leave it up to humans to see it as demented as possible. It's almost impossible to contemplate what these blue bloods were thinking of their belief that disgusted and perverted rituals could alter the physical courses of physical planetary bodies. However, it seems this toxic nonsense was now a worldwide phenomenon. Human sacrifice goes global. In the New World, the elites of the Amerindian nations practiced horrific variations on these same themes on the great stone pyramids and temples still standing there today. Lesser American tribes, complete with their totem representations of the Axis Mundi as backdrops, did the same thing with lesser resources at their disposal. The result was a still very unpleasant experience for their unfortunate victims. These peoples routinely practiced ritualized cannibalism as part of their royal and military etiquette, even up to within recent memory. The Phoenicians were notorious for their child sacrifices, revolting even the hard-bitten Romans by their practices. Even Israelite kings in the Bible repeatedly threw their firstborn into fires in self-serving ritual acts of sacrifice. Why didn't they sacrifice themselves? European pagans indulged in macabre human sacrifices of war prisoners and possible acts of cannibalism to mark cosmic events, while certain African tribes refined painful mutilation ceremonies involving child deaths. Enter the Hebrews. For a more in-depth analysis of the ancient Hebrew experience, see the book Saturn Death Cult. Well, yeah, that's where we're at. However, there was one class of people that didn't necessarily see the raids of Mars and Venus as the acts of gods, but, and here is the subtle difference, they rather viewed such cosmic events as righteous manifestations of the one true God's anger and justice. On its next flyby, Venus was to give these people the impetus to break free from a state of national slavery and establish a nation under a one true God. The exodus of Israel out of Egypt would be marked by yet more cataclysmic events, resulting in multiple falls of once powerful warrior kings and a number of nations. Most prominently, that of Egypt, the kingdom born out of the arrival of refugees escaping the cataclysm that had sunk Atlantis at the end of the now distant Golden Age. The story of the Israelite exodus out of Egyptian slavery is replete with references to what can only be described as the effects of yet more cosmic interactions between planetary bodies. It's been postulated that the famous 10 plagues of Exodus and the parting of the Red Sea were the physical gravitational effects of a close pass by Venus on its violent and erratic path to its present-day orbit. As far as the Israelites were concerned, the highly convenient approach of Venus was a result of divine timing on the part of their deity. They made no reference to the planet in their writings, only to the power of their god. Whatever one's take on the causes of the Exodus, the Israelite interpretation of events marked full-blown revolution in the way people perceived cosmic upheavals as an expression of God or gods. Instead of attributing the actual bodies involved with godlike status, the Israelite way of thinking was to identify the cosmic upheavals as evidence of a one true God's power. Under this interpretation, planet Saturn was not the actual creator, but the tool of the one true, yet still hidden creator. And so too were the subsequent actions of all the other planets involved in the great cosmic dramas since the Golden Age. The next leap forward in an Israelite train of logic was to conclude that the actual physical events in the cosmic upheavals of the Golden Age, as well as those in their own age, were actually nothing less than the one true Creator's first actual communication or message to mankind. According to this train of thought, the physical effects of interplanetary upheavals were of no divine consequence, unless one could discern and understand the intrinsic message being communicated by such events. Cosmic upheaval and interplanetary disturbances were now viewed as the divinely communicated word of the Creator, or the Logos of the Creator. The conclusion was simple and very monotheistic. Work out the message behind a series of essentially natural events, and you were effectively understanding and communicating with the Creator. You would subsequently be able to understand the Creator's motives and the Creator's objectives. Under this methodology, a careful observer of the consequences of the Creator's actions in nature could then proceed with the sure authority that they were acting in the best interests of the Creator's plan for the future of His creation. In essence, what the Israelites represented was a rediscovery of what the priesthoods at the beginning of the Silver Age tried to institute through the careful recording as mythology of the cosmic events witnessed during the Golden Age. stated again through the construct of mythology. They had hoped to impress upon future generations an overall message with warnings on how to avoid another doomsday scenario. Ritual as validation of the elite. To the warrior kings and the elites immersed in the performance of rituals, this concept of direct communication with the divine by simple observation and understanding of natural events was simply intolerable. They were the aristocracy of purpose, and their purpose in life was to perform rituals on behalf of humanity. Only through carefully staged reenactments by chosen human representatives playing out the actions attributed to the gods could the path to true enlightenment and the comprehension of any hidden message be attained. The grander the ritual, the loftier the temple, the more likely you were to experience its hidden message. The expense of this alone meant your average Joseph didn't have a hope in hell of staging a decent ascent to enlightenment. And that's just the way the elite liked it. Enlightenment was not something to be taken lightly, and it certainly shouldn't be available to the great unwashed. You simply could not have a whole nation of people thinking that they were able to make individual judgments based on the simple observation of events or the study of written reports on such events. That would mean everyone would have the potential to understand the motives and plans of the Supreme Creator. Who would be special and elite then? No. Slamming on with ever more complicated and outlandish rituals was the only way to seriously maintain the true path to Golden Age type enlightenment, and the best way to do this was to ensure that every nation adopted the warrior king model of elite government. For and by the elite. Guy in charge was the only acceptable order of nature in the minds of those elites who were, funny enough, the guys in charge. And that's where Israel found itself going wrong. Genocidal campaigns of conquest aside, which is another story. Israel rejects its gods, chooses a warrior king. Israel became corrupted. They took their eye off the ball and looked around to see if there was anything more exciting than the dreary headache of studying the Word. Maybe there was a sexier way of gaining an understanding of the mind of God. Bored with trying to understand God's message within creation, Israel decided it wanted a warrior king of its own to do the understanding for them. It got one, and within about 7 generations, they were ritually sacrificing their firstborn onto the fires of a pathetic bull god named Moloch, the Canaanite Saturn. Under warrior kings, it doesn't take long before people are doing this kind of thing, feeding babies to Moloch. Damn, that's inhumane. 1907 photo of the infamous Bohemian Grove staged a performance of The Cremation of Care, a play well performed at this elitist club to this day. Some believe the play represents a modern-day reenactment of Moloch worship, though there is no evidence that actual children have been sacrificed as part of the fun. Well, yeah, we got work to do if we want to save ourselves. Meanwhile, they're feasting on us. Do you ever get the feeling that the trap's slowly closing? Hey, I don't know if it's true. I hope it's not true. I'm just reading the book, but I'd rather know this if it was true than not know it. Babylon and the Love of Money. Babylon and the Love of Money. The Saturn death call would first come to public preeminence in ancient Babylon. There, it would learn one vital lesson in the pursuit of true power: control the issue of money. The link between drugs and war. During the early part of the Bronze Age of man, a less than heroic pursuit dominated the development of trade in the ancient world. The insidious trade in opium had regained its footing in the Anatolia region, where a bunch of warrior kings were acting like modern-day drug drug cartel, warring over who should control the lucrative trade routes between Asia and the Western Kingdom. The most powerful cartel was the Troy cartel. That would be Troy the city and not Troy McLachlan. But it was being seriously challenged by the upstart Agamemnon cartel. The battle lines were drawn, and the ensuing narco war engulfed the region for the next 10 years. The war only came to an end as a result of another planetary intervention, probably the same one that had allowed the Israelites to get out from under the Egyptians. However, the key development coming out of this conflict were the sudden advancements being made in weapons manufacture. New technologies allowed for greater kill ratio, and certain illuminated ones quickly realized the value in promoting an arms trafficking industry as a means to ensuring ever higher body counts for their ongoing blood sacrifice ritual. The penny had dropped. War as an expression of blood sacrifice was the new trend. An industry started to grow around the concept, with the development of military technology being a feature in the West, while a concentration on the art of war through strategy characterized the Eastern approach. Both resulted in the same thing. People got killed and blood flowed. For the Blue Bloods and Illuminated Ones of the various occult secret societies and mystery schools, everything was now as it should be. The warrior kings were happy. The lawyers and scribes charged with institutionalizing the various rituals were happy. The lawyers, the growing merchant class that was making a comeback after the Babel meltdown, which they always do. The slaves were worked and the people were taxed, and the victims of the seemingly endless rituals
Sustaining this happy state of affairs, they were neither happy or unhappy. They were dead. One-on-one duels like the one pictured here between Achilles and Hector became passé as far as adherents to the Saturn death cult were concerned. The Saturn death cult and monetary control. Roughly 600 years after the cosmic events at Sodom and Gomorrah, the Exodus, even the sporadic marauding runs by planets Mars and Venus, seemed to have come to an end, and all seemed well. But something was missing in the greater scheme of things. As far as the Illuminated Ones were concerned, they were still hankering for a return to the debt-based slavery system of Babel as the core economic model for mankind. A tweaking of strategy had to be carefully considered if they were to have total control over the affairs of man. While war had already been a source of blood-soaked satisfaction for the elite's ritualistic needs, it was an actual promotion of increasingly more contrived and barbaric wars that certain Illuminated Ones found an answer to killing two birds with one stone. Pun intended. Since the time of the Trojan narco conflict, it had been recognized that the casualties of war could be exploited for ritualistic satisfaction. But to date, capitalizing on these deaths had only been opportunistic at best. The key to a consistent supply of guaranteed bloodshed was to be found in the notion of warfare being an ongoing manufactured to order enterprise. And that would require money. That's what I'm thinking. They're just needlessly wasting human lives. As a result, and galvanized into action by promises of expanding material wealth and power, a rash of warrior kings made their first manipulated yet bloody steps towards the concept of empire, carefully selecting dates in accordance with now well-established blood rituals were chosen for them to initiate multiple wars of conquest. Yeah, they do pay attention to the dates and the time and all that. I knew that already. I didn't know they would really be like that, though. I don't know why. I guess I want to believe in the man's better nature. The happy result of these wars, as anticipated by the illuminated powers, was the immense scaling up of their blood sacrifice needs, while their warrior king puppets sank ever deeper into financial debt.
Ha ha ha, yes, another soul.
Yeah. The equation was simple. War needs money, and borrowed money to pay for war debts equals debt. Debt equals slavery. If a kingdom could be manipulated into accepting debt, then that would make it a kingdom of slaves. Power to enslave whole kingdoms was in being the one who was owed that debt. However, this was only guaranteed if you controlled the issuance of the money borrowed by the warrior kings in the first place. In the Near East, at a place called the Plains of Dura, some highly positioned and privileged illuminated ones got busy. Babylon, the financial center of the ancient world. This image, by an unknown artist, shows the 2 real estate projects most associated with Babylon, its hanging gardens and the infamous Tower of Babel. The financial rise of Babylon. The warrior king of a growing city-state called Babylon had recently enjoyed a series of spectacular conquests. Babylon was now an empire, and its own cadre of mystery schools and secret societies held great public influence and renown. Through their overt ritual-based control of the warrior king Nebuchadnezzar, these illuminated ones conspired to erect a golden image that would dominate the plains of Dura. Essentially, this was the world's first financial gold standard, and Dura was Babylon's answer to the modern Federal Reserve System of the United States. Anybody not adhering to this gold standard in matters of trade and commerce within Babylon was to be ruthlessly exterminated by a fiery death.
Yes.
The temples once again started to issue money as a debt on their own behalf against this new gold standard. These same temples, controlled by the illuminated ones, quickly became rich. The great public ceremony celebrating the success of the new financial system was only marred by a mysterious upsurge in the disappearance of Babylonian children. The almost forgotten Israelites, their own warrior king experiment such a dismal failure that they were now captives of the Babylonian Empire, had a serious problem with this golden image. See the Bible's book of Daniel, chapter 3. Their understanding of commerce and trade denounced the issue of money as a debt as being nothing more than criminal usury, an abominable practice, according to their own priesthood, who had somehow survived the deprivations of their own warrior kings and corrupt secret societies. These Israelite priests organized a financial boycott of the new financial system, and the Babylonian gold standard started to fall apart. Illuminated ones of the Babylonian mystery schools never forgave the Israelites for their stubborn refusal to bend to the dictates of Babylon's gold standard. Is this true? To be thwarted at the time by the more pressing needs of dealing with the arrival of deadly Persian warrior kings, and later rampant Greek demigod by the name of Alexander. Fall of Babylon. The Saturn death cult goes underground. Babylon fell quickly, its great gold standard experiment nipped in the bud. In one night, Babylon ceased to be its own master, and its own illuminated ones joined their Israelite nemesis as fellow captives in their own city. Their golden image now laying in ruins. The remnants of Babylon's secret societies and mystery schools melted away into the desert night to be reborn as Mystery Babylon. Banished, predictable. Here, the biblical prophet Daniel, one of the main Hebrew adversaries to the establishment of a financial Babylon gold standard.
Except those needed for internal order and a new United Nations peace force. And it's